Insurance isn't our only passion at UFG Insurance. We're dedicated to supporting the communities where we live and work. We proudly offer our employees paid time off to volunteer. Their work is making a positive difference across the U.S. UFG's Go Beyond Award is presented to one employee annually for exceptional community service. Striving to deliver on our promises is more than what we do. It's who we are. For a company promising community support, think UFG.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Addressing the Needs of Homeless Populations. This is our first session in the Economic and Community Development track for Iowa Ideas 2024. We're so glad to have you here with us today. In this session, we're going to be talking about the evolving landscape of needs for our homeless populations in Iowa, how to balance the needs of unsheltered folks with the public pressure for solutions, and how a recent high-level Supreme Court ruling has affected movements on the ground to address these issues in cities and communities. My name is Elijah Decius. I'm a features reporter here at the Gazette, and I'll be the moderator for this session. Before we get to our panelists, Iowa Ideas and the Gazette would like to thank our generous sponsors. This session is sponsored by UFG Insurance and ITC Midwest. And we have a great panel today. Up first on our panel is Chris Coleman. Chris, tell us about yourself and your experience with this important topic over in Des Moines.
Thank you. I'm Chris Coleman. I serve on the Des Moines City Council. My day job is at a Iowa nonprofit. We have an office on First Avenue in Cedar Rapids, so I'm over there a lot, and I love what the Gazette does for the community there. I'm pleased to be a part of this. I've served on the City Council for a number of years. I actually retired for a couple and got reelected last year. I serve on our regional homeless coordinating council and really enjoy trying to unlock the secrets of how we can help our most vulnerable.
Absolutely. Next up, we have Janae Peterman. Janae, tell us about yourself and your work on these issues in Cedar Rapids.
Sure. So I'm Janae Peterman, the Homeless Systems Manager with Housing Fund for Linn County. It's still a new role to me, so I get hung up on it every time I have to announce it. But my role is a shared partnership between the City of Cedar Rapids and Linn County. It was developed after the National Alliance came in last summer and gave recommendations on our homeless systems approach and how we can better serve that and improve that. And so that's where my role was born. Really, my role is to oversee the best practice interventions and resources within our community and how to collaborate with all of the providers so that we're moving forward efficiently. And then prior to that, I spent 10 years with Waypoint Services as the Director of Housing Services, overseeing several different interventions. So emergency shelter, rapid rehousing, prevention diversion, and then our coordinated entry system.
Yeah, quite a wealth of experience. We're really glad to have you here today. And last but certainly not least, we have Marcy Thompson. Marcy, tell us what you do.
Well, first, thank you so much for having me today for this conversation. So Marcy Thompson, I'm the Vice President for Programs and Policy at the National Alliance and Homelessness. We are a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization committed to preventing and ending homelessness in the United States. I lead our policy and advocacy efforts, working with national and local partners to engage them in policy activities, working towards a shared goal of ending homelessness. And we base our policy efforts on research and knowledge from the field, which is most important. I've been at the Alliance for about 18 months, but I've been in this field for more than 20 years in a range of roles, starting out as a direct service provider, a lot of time as a federal employee, technical assistance provider, working with communities all around the country, and then most recently as an advocate. So really excited to be a part of this conversation.
We're excited to have you. Thank you for joining us. Let's get started with this. Homelessness and housing insecurity are topics that have been getting more and more attention locally and nationally in the news over the last few years. I want each of you to give us a lay of the land and a view into your corner of the world. What has been happening on this issue in recent years, and why do you think more and more folks are paying attention now to people affected by homelessness? Let's start with Marcy. Why don't you give us, since you're at the national level, so let's
Sure.
start at the higher level.
Yeah, I mean, so I think if you just look at the numbers, homelessness has been on an upward trend since about 2017. Between 2022 and 2023 alone, homelessness increased overall across the country by about 12%. And most alarmingly, within that number, we are seeing record high numbers of people who are experiencing homelessness in unsheltered locations. And so with that increase in folks sleeping outside, homelessness becomes a lot more visible to the general public, to business owners, to just the communities in general, which in turn, I think, puts a lot of pressure on local decision makers to try and solve a really complex problem with solutions that are that feel maybe fast or that don't necessarily address the root issues at play. I think just a couple of things that are relevant to the conversation to set the context is if you just look at those numbers alone, at the total number of people experiencing homelessness, it might seem like, okay, well then clearly our systems aren't working, and that is the issue. However, if you actually look at if you dig deeper into the data, you see that these under-resourced homelessness response systems are still managing to serve more than 1 million households each year, exiting more than 300,000 people to permanent housing. And yet at the same time, nearly 19,000 people are entering homelessness for the first time every single week. So there is this impossible, it's impossible to keep up with that level of inflow. And the real driver for that is the severe affordable housing crisis. Of course, there are other factors that play into this, but with the US lacking 7.3 million rental homes that are affordable to the lowest income renters, we are feeling this from coast to coast. So what used to be something that was primarily an issue on, big urban cities is now becoming a real challenge all across the country from coast to coast.
Yeah, Janae, does that all ring true with you here locally?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Marcy hit the nail on the head, right? It's definitely becoming more visible within Cedar Rapids. We're seeing more people not want to enter shelter, and more people experiencing chronic homelessness within our community. And it's primarily centralized in the downtown area, right? So, in Cedar Rapids, we have a really developing and thriving downtown community. And so that's also where all of our service providers are located. So it makes it a really emotionally charged topic right now.
Yeah. And then Chris, you have a slightly different role here. You're on city council. You're not, necessarily working for a nonprofit advocacy organization. Tell us what you're seeing on the ground here in Des Moines and some of the concerns that your constituents have been voicing to you.
Yeah, thank you. Our numbers and the trajectory are very similar to what Marcy and Janae spoke about nationally and locally. I would say that an issue that we have in Des Moines is not just the visibility, but the growing concern that there are a small portion, but a portion of those living on our streets that appear to a lot of people to be involved in more dangerous activities, whether they're trafficking guns or drugs or humans. There's a lot of angst that not engaging with these homeless encampments is creating danger. We do have a large problem in our downtown. That's where a lot of our issues are, but most of the energy and comments that we've gotten are from neighborhood leaders who are concerned about the woods behind the neighborhood park, the area where our rivers traverse our community, and they're worried about the kind of the additional issues that come with some of these encampments. And I want to be clear, we're not talking about a large percentage, but the small percentage, like on most things, have gotten the attention of people who have asked the city to take a more aggressive stance in how we deal with it to keep our parks, sidewalks, public areas safe.
Yeah. So, obviously this is a massive, multifaceted topic. It's affected from everything from housing infrastructure, mental health, substance use, the economy. Tell us about some of the biggest challenges facing you and your organizations in tackling this right now, and how that's maybe evolved or gotten a little more complicated over the last few years.
You want me to start again?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So I mean, I think it's important. So I mentioned kind of the trend over the last few years since 2017, but if you look a little further back, from 2010 to 2016, we were seeing really big decreases year over year in all subpopulations of homelessness. And that was in big part thanks to largely bipartisan support for evidence-based solutions at all levels of government. And that allowed for resources to flow in the right direction, and for those resources to be prioritized for things that we know are effective approaches. I think since then, in addition to the growing affordable housing crisis, which is outside of the purview of the homelessness response system, it's something that we can't control, as well as an inadequate social safety net for folks with the lowest incomes. This topic has also become very politicized, and has largely been, that politicization has been largely fueled by these pervasive and false narratives that blame homelessness on individual factors. And so it's, I appreciate Chris pointing out that even in his community, it's a small percentage of folks, but that largely, people experiencing homelessness are there because of a lot of complex and challenging issues that are not their fault, that are not because of individual choices per se. And so I think that what we've been seeing in response to that is there are some very well-resourced groups out there who are also influencing the rise that we're seeing in laws and ordinances that really are seeking to penalize people for sleeping in outdoor places, that are focused on encampment sweeps, using arrests and fines, etc. That is influencing what we're seeing. And at the end of the day, it's a lot of public money that's being spent on things that are not solving the problem.
For sure. And I do want to get into that that Supreme Court ruling in a minute. But I do want to kind of lay a little bit more foundation for it with Janae and Chris. Janae, at a local level, are the challenges any different than what Marcy just laid out for us? Are there any big factors here?
No, we're seeing the same exact, the lack of affordable housing for these individuals, especially those on fixed income, being able to afford their housing with that monthly stipend that they receive. The lack of quality landlords willing to partner with programs to help rehouse these individuals is a struggle. And then just adequate wraparound services. I think we'll probably talk about it a little later on, but you can't just rehouse individuals and expect them to be able to be stably housed ongoing without some wraparound supports. And so I think all of the service providers within the community and probably all communities are stretched really, really thin. So being able to have the capacity to provide those quality wraparound services so people can maintain housing is also a struggle right now.
For sure. And Chris, since you're working with your constituents a lot, does the local perception kind of match what the advocates are telling us right now?
Tell me which advocates. There's advocates on
the ones in
both
front of us
sides
right now.
Is that?
Just with Janae and Marcy here.
Oh, I think they're right. I think, any honest assessment would say there's not a shortage of ideas and strategies that could work. There's a shortage of funds and kind of the will of communities to invest in those, and so as a result, we're falling behind, and that's troublesome to everybody, regardless of political leanings or thoughts about how you solve this. Everybody's solutions cost money, and we don't have it.
Yeah. Let's get into that Supreme Court ruling. Earlier this year, Grants Pass v. Johnson came to the conclusion that municipalities such as cities, counties, can ban folks from sleeping or camping in public, and they can enforce that with fines or other punishments, even if those folks don't necessarily have anywhere private to go. This ruling has polarized a lot of folks on the best way to address homelessness in an effective, sustainable way. A lot of advocates have said this criminalizes homelessness and makes a bad situation worse, that it kind of compounds a lot of the trauma that's happening there. Marcy, tell us the kind of reaction you're seeing around the country, what this looks like, and how it's affecting organizations you work with in real time.
Yeah, so the first thing I just want to maybe clarify is what the Supreme Court ruling actually did. So the Supreme Court ruling essentially determined that the cruel and unusual punishment clause of the Eighth Amendment does not prohibit a city such as the city of Grants Pass from enforcing criminal punishments against people who are camping outside. So it was, and that clause is what other rulings, such as the Ninth Circuit ruling in the case of Martin v. Boise, that was the clause that had been used to prohibit such bans. So it was less of a you can do this. It was more of
you're not prohibited from
undermining. Yeah, it was more of undermining what those prior rulings had done. So I just think that that's an important thing to clarify, because with that, I think although it has given tacit approval to leaders to choose that sort of approach, it certainly doesn't require communities to do anything. It doesn't make communities do anything differently necessarily than the approach that they were doing. However, we have definitely seen significant rise in ordinances either being newly introduced or more significantly being enforced. So there might have been laws on the books, but that were not necessarily being enforced, that are now, that we're seeing a lot more of that. I think from the national level, we're doing a lot of work with national partners to provide as much support to local communities and states who are trying to combat these sweeping bills, especially at the state level, that are really, impacting their ability to do their job and forcing them to use resources that should be spent working with folks that are the most vulnerable, addressing kind of being responsive to these laws instead. So it's having a very big impact.
Yeah. Chris, I want to bounce over to you with this. Cities are not required to do this kind of thing. Recently, Des Moines has passed an ordinance as part of a much bigger multifaceted effort to combat homelessness. But that does include one plank with a $15 fine for this kind of thing. Talk to me about that and what led you to that decision.
Great question, and it's been a difficult struggle for us as a community and as a council to figure out the right balance. We started all this by saying we want to be the best city in America in terms of having a safety net that works for our most vulnerable. We want to invest in that more than ever, and we want to help people get out of the cycle of poverty and homelessness of being unsheltered, and it's going to take an extraordinary effort. But number two, we also have to balance our, obligation to keep Des Moines safe and thriving. And we came to the conclusion that our vision of a welcoming, safe city didn't include encampments in our parks and on our sidewalks. And so we had been working on approaches for how we would deal with this for months in advance. And I would say that the grants pass ruling didn't so much give us the authorization we needed to do this. We just wanted to make sure that the Supreme Court wasn't going to provide clarity that made us adjust our ordinance. So we waited until the Supreme Court ruling came down. It's important to say that the $15 fine for sleeping in public areas, parks, and sidewalks is $15. It can't be levied against people that don't have the wherewithal or the resources to pay it. And it can't be a citation given if there's not capacity in our shelters. And so those were two of the very things at heart of the grants pass ruling that we weren't going to do anyway. We could do it now based on the grants pass, but chose not to. And so that penalty allows ultimately our police officers to get involved in a situation that has risen to a level of concern for neighbors or cities or the community. But that's not our first line of defense. I want to make sure that people know that over the last couple of months, we've raised money and allocated funds to have 4 outreach workers. That's the first point of contact for any encampment or complaint that we have about campers or sleepers. We've created a fund to help people with the incidentals to get into shelter or housing, clearing up old utility bills or transportation or application fees for apartments, whatever it might be. We've done a number of things along with that. And I'd be happy to talk about more of those planks. We did 13 different strategies. The $15 fine was one of them. But that was ultimately our backstop to make sure that in situations that were out of control or creating danger or trouble for our community, that the police could intercede and would have something behind them. $15 in Des Moines is the same price as a parking ticket. We tried to not make it. I think the city manager first recommended 150, and then there was a lot of talk about where it might go. We tried to make it as little as possible, only because we wanted to put something in there to give our police some authority to engage when a situation had gotten dangerous or troublesome beyond what our social workers and outreach workers could deal with.
Yeah. But, police involvement with helping to move along, for lack of a better term, some of these folks who may be in encampments, that's nothing new here. So I wonder if you could help clarify what this does how this helps with the situation in a way that it, you couldn't do before. You compare $15 to the price of a parking ticket, but these folks don't have cars. So, is it fair to say, $15 is not a big deal to someone who has, probably no cash on them?
Well, again, if they have none, they're not going to pay a fee or be cited. We're trying to be as compassionate as we can, recognizing that there's a lot of complications. But I think at the end of the day, our old process that ultimately police and other departments got involved in is that it was basically an eviction process that we gave people 10 days, we posted, and they had time to move. And we came to the conclusion that there are some situations where we can't wait that 10 days and we need some lever, some rule on the books that allows the police to say, this is a situation where we can't, that we can't accept. It could be any number of things, a dangerous situation. We've had shootings and deaths in some of our encampments here. We've taken, big dangerous weapons out of our campers. There's been some situations where we would want to take immediate action, and you need a rule on the books to allow the police to do that.
Yeah. I want to open this question up to Janae first, but I want everyone to kind of pitch in as you see fit after she's finished. Janae, is this, simply a matter of how we incentivize folks on the streets to seek services? Is this kind of a carrot versus a stick problem, so to speak?
I think it certainly could be. I think that is how some communities are viewing it, right? I know here in Cedar Rapids, we haven't gone down that path yet, or hopefully won't, right? Instead, we've invested a lot of time with the National Alliance, I would say, over the last year to really do some assessment and some deep dives into what our system really looks like, where are we struggling, but where are we also doing really good? So I think right now we're committed to tracking the data and investing in those service gaps to really help ensure that we are moving people through the system as quickly as possible and ending homelessness as quickly as possible. However, I will say I do feel for community leaders. I think they're finding themselves in a really difficult position. They're having to find a balance between showing compassion for those who are unsheltered in our community, while at the same time showing compassion for our community members who are expressing feelings of their safety being at risk within the community. So it's a delicate balance for leaders, and so I think it's a hard position to be in right now.
Yeah. You said Cedar Rapids hasn't gone down this path yet, and for that matter, Lynn County too, since you work with the county.
Yeah.
Tell me why. What have the conversation looked like behind the scenes here?
Yeah. Also, I will clarify, I should not have said yet. I just know we really haven't had these conversations. I think, like I just mentioned, we're really committed to following through some of the changes that were recommended by the National Alliance and seeing where that takes us. So working on getting that baseline data, where are we at right now? And if we implement all of these different practices and interventions that were recommended, where does that get us a year or 2 years down the road? Are we seeing improvements within our system and the inflow into homelessness and outflow?
Yeah. Marcy, give us the national perspective here on this. I don't even know if I'm framing it in a fair way. Is this a carrot versus a stick kind of question that a lot of cities are facing?
Yeah, well, first I just want to echo Janae's point about how hard this is to tackle, and I don't take that lightly. The position that folks like Chris are in, I just don't think that can be said enough that about that. In terms of the carrot and the stick, I guess from our perspective, and there are always nuances, right? But by and large, it is a false assumption that people are just service resistant and unwilling to accept help. I think what we would argue is, are the services and supports being offered maybe people resistant? If you're offering shelter and you have shelter beds that are open, can you take a look at maybe some of the rules that might be keeping people from saying yes? For example, you don't have allow for pets, or you don't allow for households to come in together as they present. So fear of being separated from your pet or from your family members or from your partner can keep people out. There's a lot of rules that may be in place for a variety of reasons, but that are really prohibitive to people who are sleeping outside. So I think that the first thing in all of this is go and talk to the people that are sleeping outside. Go and understand, what do they want? What is it that would move them into a different space? Are there other ways that you can engage or to make the spaces that they're in while they're outside? Are there ways to make those spaces safer? So I guess, from our perspective, it's not a carrot versus a stick. I think it is, how do we make sure that we're providing what people need in general? And I think it's the other piece that is important to remember is, like, these are just people, right? There are kids, there are parents, there are siblings, there are neighbors who did not have access to the things that they needed already, and this is why they're forced outside. So I think to the extent that communities, as Janae was saying, are really taking a look at their own systems and the things that they're working on, and doing everything they can to make those things, those services and options, what people actually need, and making sure that they're accessible to the people that need them most, always feels like the first step. Because otherwise you're just gonna, it's just gonna be a cycle, I think, of folks coming in and out and not solving that.
Yeah. We have a question here that I think would be good at this point. David Hagan asked, does any data exist nationally or locally that identifies the portion of the homeless population who are working, or people working jobs and still have insufficient resources to maintain their housing? Marcy, I know earlier you had alluded to the fact that a lot of folks entering homelessness today are doing it so for the first time. I'll give this question to you for now.
Yeah, so a couple things. Yeah, so we definitely are seeing higher rates of people who are employed full-time, who are also experiencing homelessness. I would say this is what we're hearing from communities. There isn't necessarily a national data point that we have to turn to, but what we're hearing from providers, particularly I think around vehicular homelessness, that we're seeing more and more people that are employed who are unable to maintain their housing. We're also seeing this within the homelessness workforce. We did a survey last year of just homeless service provider organizations and their staff, and there was a large percentage of the workforce who are either experiencing housing instability, who are experiencing homelessness, have experienced homelessness, and so yeah, I mean, I think that's a very real thing. I think the other piece that is worth mentioning here around that inflow, the fastest growing group that is becoming homeless for the first time year over year is older adults. And, like, by and large, it has, I think, tripled in the last few years alone. And a large portion of those folks are going outside. Some of that is because the shelter options aren't accessible to older adults who might have higher needs. Like, that seems counterintuitive, but that is happening. And that is tied to fixed incomes. If you have a fixed income and it isn't going up year after year, but the rent is going up and the cost of everything else is going up, that is also forcing a lot of people outside.
Yeah. In places around Iowa, visible homelessness has not historically been the same in the way it is in many other larger cities and more populated areas around the country. But in recent years, that has changed quite a bit. Janae's alluded to that here in downtown Cedar Rapids. What factors are making homelessness more visible in our communities lately? Is it just a sheer increase in people who don't have housing, or are there some other factors at play here? And I'm going to start with Janae for this one.
Yeah, I may not be public or a popular opinion, I don't know, but I'm going to say yes to that. I don't know if anybody's ever read the book, Homelessness is a Housing Problem, but in that book, two researchers went across the nation studying the correlation between cost of living compared to homelessness, substance abuse compared to homelessness, and mental health compared to homelessness, and a few other factors. But I feel like substance abuse and mental health are those that are the most prevalent in this conversation. And what they found is that there was no correlation between individuals experiencing substance abuse issues or mental health issues with the increase of homelessness. However, on the other hand, as the cost of living increased throughout communities, so did the rates of homelessness. And so there's a direct correlation to that. I think it's hard to remember that the vast majority of the population who's struggling with substance abuse or untreated mental health or undiagnosed mental health, they are all stably housed or precariously housed, but they're housed, they're not experiencing homelessness. It's a very small population that falls into homelessness. But for providers and for others trying to address the problem, I think oftentimes we lose sight of that. And it's hard to remember that because the vast majority of those that are experiencing homelessness are experiencing substance abuse and mental health, right? But we also know that that's more of a condition of living unsheltered within the community as opposed to the reason somebody is unsheltered. So that's my long-winded way of saying yes, I truly believe, and if you haven't read the book, I really recommend everybody to purchase it and read it. It's an amazing book, and it really lays out that yes, it is housing is really what we need to address homelessness, including wraparound supports and case management and things like that. Those things need to come along with it, but without the housing, you can't provide those. You can't stabilize individuals. So,
And what was the title of that book again?
I think it's Homelessness is a Housing Problem.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Chris, I'll go to you next with this question. You know, what factors are at play here? Is it just a sheer increase? Are there other factors at play? Is it a housing first kind of issue? Tell us your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I certainly the solution long term is more affordable housing. But I do think that when we're talking about the population of the homeless that are unsheltered, those that are most vulnerable right now, it's an issue of services because I don't think it's realistic that people that have been chronically homeless are going to succeed. If all of a sudden they moved into an apartment next to me or a duplex down the street, I think they need some additional services for a period of time to kind of take their temperature down and reorient themselves. Because with a lot of support and other people around, I think it's impossible for me or most to understand the complications and the difficulty of living on the streets. So I do think that housing is a piece of it. But if we do better on housing, we're going to move people out of the shelter, which creates capacity in the shelter, which allows more people to move in. And so I do think there is this, kind of compression of issues that one builds off of the other. And there's no doubt about that. So I think housing is an issue. In Des Moines, our point in time survey, and for the people listening and participating today, cities that get federal government money have to do a twice a year count of the homeless. Our summer to summer count from 23 to 24 went up about 15%, but our unsheltered population went up 20%. So I do think there is just a growing percentage. And if that 20% continued to occur the next, 2 years, 4 years, 6 years, we're going to be in a situation in communities around Iowa where it's really, really difficult to solve that. And that's one of the reasons why we tried to take, pretty intentional action in Des Moines.
Yeah. Marcy, what role has this increased visibility around the country played in your work and in the work of your partners around the country to solve such a complex issue? Do you think it's, maybe hurrying folks to do things a little more hastily and maybe look to things that they wouldn't have looked to before?
Yeah, I think that we're understandably, I think communities are trying to meet the crisis with urgency. Like I understand that that sense of responsibility to the community. But I do think that oftentimes it is short-sighted because, when people aren't going to no longer be unsheltered if you simply displace them from an encampment. They'll still likely be unsheltered They will now be disconnected from their service providers. They may now be in greater danger. That isn't to say that the encampment isn't problematic and that we don't have to find ways to address the encampments. It just means that sometimes, oftentimes, that these approaches are focused on trying to solve this thing as if it exists in isolation, as if the encampments and the increase in unsheltered homelessness is somehow separate from all of these other factors that are playing in. I often talk about housing being the common denominator, right? Like for every single person that is homeless, every single one needs homeless or needs housing, and every single one of them lost their housing, resulting in their homelessness. However, just like the four of us that are sitting on this call, the types of supports and healthcare needs and all of those things that we have access to in our lives that make us able to thrive, everybody needs those things. And unfortunately, to Chris's point, yeah, there are folks that have really high needs. Do we actually have the services that can meet those needs? Like it isn't a matter of whether or not they need those things. Where is the capacity to provide that? Where is the funding for the case managers that are able to be engaging with folks on a weekly or more basis? Where are the healthcare options that meet people where they are? This is really at the end of the day, this is a resource issue, and it's around affordable housing. It's around resources for the homelessness response system. The HUD funding that is targeted on homelessness, those funds have increased year over year. The vast majority of that funding goes to renew existing programs, pay for continued operations, to continue housing people that are already housed. So there's not any new capacity coming into communities to solve this. So I think, yeah, it is extremely hard. And it's also extremely hard to go to somebody like Chris and the folks that he's working with and say, well, that's not the right solution. You need affordable housing. And we get that that's going to take 10, 15, 20 years to get there. So we're also trying to think about what can you do in the meantime to be responsive to the needs of the community, the urgent crisis, while working towards the long-term solutions.
Yeah. And I think that's a good segue into what I wanted to ask next. Janae, tell us about the resources that Cedar Rapids and Linn County has right now, and how that compares to what you might need in an ideal world to get the job done here.
Oh, that wasn't on my question sheet, Elijah.
Oh.
Yeah, right now within Cedar Rapids and Linn County specifically, we have, I feel like at this point in time, right, because we still have COVID dollars to spend. So we do have adequate funding to rehouse people. But what we don't have is what Marcy was alluding to, is we don't have adequate funding to pay staffing for that, right? To pay staff to stay and retain them, to pay enough case managers to actually do the level of work that needs to be done. Which is why I feel like when that big push from the COVID dollars came into communities and they were all struggling to spend it, and then there was this big, all the media all talked about these these communities aren't spending it fast enough. They don't really need this money, and that's not true. The fact of it is we couldn't hire enough staff at the ability that we had, like the rate that we could hire them at, to actually do the work and do quality work. And so we need to increase our affordable housing within our community. We need to increase our permanent supportive housing within our community. And that's clear. We know that we're at a shortage with that. And those are things that we're working on. We have a really strong coordinated entry system. We have a lot of providers that are engaged and committed to operating through that system. But we have some things that we need to work on that too, right? And rethinking how those relationships work. Just like Marcy was talking about, these individuals are in need of extensive healthcare, mental health, substance abuse treatment, and where how are we helping support those agencies as well to participate in being a solution to this problem? So it's a multifaceted approach. We have some really great service providers in our community, but they all are lacking and they need support in order to really be able to meet the demand and build their capacity.
Yeah. Let's talk about solutions too. Many homeless advocacy organizations have for a long time taken a housing first approach to tackling homelessness. Chris, does this approach still make sense to you and your colleagues who are facing this issue in Des Moines?
Well, like I said, I think it is an important, critical piece, and the most important and the most expensive. And there's also political troubles with that. Where do you put affordable housing? How do you get new stuff built? NIMBYism exists. And it's important because in Des Moines, 75% of our homeless are in shelters right now. We have over 500 people in shelters that we would love to find additional housing units for, or to help them on their way. Some of them may never want that. They might not, be capable of it, or they're more comfortable in the shelter setting. But what we really need is additional services that help people deal with their underlying problems. In Des Moines, we have a number of people that self-report that drug abuse is one of their causes, mental health. If we don't deal with those underlying issues, we're never really going to help people long term. We're just going to put a Band-Aid on it, and a housing option is only going to be a temporary fix that makes us feel better, but it doesn't really help the individual start to build a better life. And so, focusing in on those underlying issues is a really important piece of this.
Yeah. And what you're talking about right now, solving some of these other issues that come along with homelessness, permanent supportive housing has been one great approach to helping with that. Marcy, what does the landscape for permanent supportive housing look like right now? What are the capacities at?
It's not enough. I mean, there's not enough. I think we've been seeing increases, or we were seeing a lot of increases in that period from 2010 to 2016. I think the availability of funding has shifted. I do think it is really important to just keep in mind that housing first, because this is tied to the permanent supportive housing conversation, is not a program type, right? It is not distinguishable from PSH or it is just an approach. And fundamentally, if you go back to the model of what housing first is, it is simply saying people can't truly address their service needs if they're sleeping outside. So, can we get folks into housing and wrap those services around them? I think what has happened, again, because of insufficient resources all the way around, you have folks maybe getting into housing at a faster clip than the services are there and available to match them. And then we say, well, it's the model of housing first is faulty. And I think that we have to separate what that true model is in a fidelity sense from what communities actually have the funding to do. So we can talk all day about challenges with implementation, and how the lack of resources are able to adequately meet the need. I just think it's important to make that distinction, because I think we all agree that placing somebody that has really high service needs into housing on their own and not engaging with them for weeks or months is not an acceptable approach or type of engagement. And that wouldn't be considered housing first. And, as PSH goes, all that is permanent housing combined with services. And, the the biggest funder of permanent supportive housing is HUD. HUD is paying for housing. They pay for some services. They pay for a lot of services. But there isn't another source of funding that matches that in the same way. If you look at veterans specifically, and this is the last point I'll make on this, but I think it's really important. The VA has adopted Housing First since 2012. Where have we seen the greatest reductions in homelessness overall? We are seeing increases, even though they are housing more people now than ever before. I think the VA just released, they housed something like 41,000 veterans in the last year, which is more than the number of veterans that were homeless last year, right? But they use a Housing First approach. And why is it effective? They're a medical system. They have all of the services that are there and available to pair with the housing, so that they have this really great permanent supportive housing resource, which is HUD VASH, which is HUD and VA supportive housing. So I think, again, it is critical to have all of those things so that you can tailor it to the person's individual needs. And absent that, we're going to continue to see the trends that we're seeing.
Yeah. We have a question here from the audience. Rachel Cohen asked, affordable housing is a term that gets tossed around without definition of what the number is. What is affordable? How do we define affordable?
I was just going to say, I mean, technically it's housing that's no more than 30% of your income, right? So it's specific to each person and their household type. I know specifically, I'll just speak to our community. We do have these affordable housing units that are being built, these larger complex. The reality is they are meant for people that are within an income range of 60 to 80% area median income. The individuals experiencing homelessness are mostly 30% or below the area median income. So these they don't meet the qualifications to go into these affordable housing units due to their limited income. You know, most HUD federal dollars, you're not allowed to spend on anybody experiencing homelessness who is making more than 50% the area median income. So nobody experiencing homelessness that can be served through rapid rehousing or any other housing program can even get into these affordable housing units in our community. They play a role and they're important in our community to build housing for the workforce. But for those that are extremely low income, we don't have those units really that exist or that are being built due to a whole host of other complications that come along with that. But I hope that kind of answers the question.
Yeah, I think it does. Yeah, it's really helpful sometimes to have those technical details. People they don't know what they don't know. So everyone here has a stake in ending homelessness, and I think everyone wants to, even if we disagree on how to do it. Marcy, you talked about politicization of these issues earlier. How has the politicization of homelessness affected your work and your ability to address the issues with your partners?
Yeah, I mean, we're almost at time, so I'll be brief here. I think that the saddest thing that has happened in the last few years is not being able to have conversations like this. I think a lot of us end up, because of that polarization, we end up having a lot of conversations with people that agree with us or people that are of similar mind. And I think if we could have more conversations like this, we could find where the common ground is and find a path forward. And I think that's what happened. That was what was happening for many, many, many years. And that thread has been lost. And I think that's what I'm really interested in navigating is how do we just have conversation again and allow ourselves to disagree, but find those pieces in which we have commonality and hone in on those.
Yeah. Janae, any thoughts on this, on how this has or might affect your work in the future on the ground here?
You know, I mirror a lot of what Marcy just said. You know, I think right now it is a polarized topic. I think there are a lot of emotions that come with these discussions. Everybody brings their own viewpoint to the table, and their viewpoint is valid. They're based on their own personal experiences. However, just like Marcy said, I think at the end of the day, no matter which side of the spectrum you are on in these conversations, we all want the same thing, right? We all want to see unsheltered homelessness decrease in our community. So it's just my hope as we move forward, like Marcy said, we can have these conversations. We can look at the facts and the data, and we can allow that to drive our decision making and not having these emotional knee-jerk reactions that we sometimes find ourselves falling into.
Yeah, conversations are so important. That's the central tenet to Iowa Ideas. And, something that comes with conversation is nuance and understanding nuance. Chris, I want to ask you, what are some of the nuances in this crisis and the response to it that you think maybe haven't been captured very well by news coverage or by what people are seeing out there?
Well, it's a great question, and I think part of it goes to the politics. I want to say that I think this is a lot about politics, but not the capital P that we usually think about. It's about how do you build a good community where you're really trying to. This is the hardest issue I think that we've tackled as a city, and to me, as we listen to our citizens, I'll give you a little stat. Of the 7 people on the Des Moines City Council, 6 were up for re-election last November. 5 won. All those 5 voted for our ordinance and all of our services. We're all Democrats. It's not as if there was some kind of political divide there. The one person that didn't win last fall voted against the ordinance. And so I think there is a certain amount of reality that the community right now does not feel safe. And there are a lot of situations that happen in neighborhoods, at churches, at coffee shops, where the talk goes to the homeless when not always it's homeless individuals causing the problem or creating the angst. I think in some ways the homeless in our town have gotten a bad rap from some of the other kind of nasty characters that are causing problems in our parks, on our streets, at our events, and as a result, it's caused us to have to take a more aggressive stance. But I do think the nuance is how do you thread the needle, because everybody wants to live in a community that's compassionate. And how do you measure that? Do you measure that because you leave people alone and let them live where they want, abandon them in dangerous, woods and areas? It's a tough place to live. And I think for us, or at least a majority of our council, we decided that the best way to measure compassion is how many people do you get off the street? How many can you get into shelter and services where at least they have a fighting chance to try and make something of their lives and feel better about the direction for the future. And so to me, this is less about politics, meaning partisanism or suburbs against cities or anything like that. It has to do with, how do you find being a really compassionate city while also trying to be a safe city?
All right. I want to ask one last quick question. I'm going to give each of you about 20 seconds. What can everyday Iowans do to help with this issue? How can we pave a better landscape for addressing this issue in our cities and communities? Marcy, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think the first and biggest thing that you can do is be educated and understand the issue. I think being an advocate. So even if we don't agree on all of the things, we know we need more resources. So getting out there and advocating for more resources feels important. And reflecting on reality versus perception feels really important. Like Chris said about, who are really causing the problem. So I think educating yourself, advocating wherever you can, and reflecting feels like what all of us can do as individuals.
Okay, Janae, real quick.
Yeah, I'm going to say just be a part of the solution. So reach out to your local homeless service providers, find out how you can donate time or contribute financially to their organization. And if that doesn't work, exactly what Marcy said, or if that doesn't work for you, reach out to somebody that's an expert in this field in your community. Go have coffee, be inquisitive, ask questions, seek to understand the complexities. That way you can go out and share that knowledge with your friends, your families, your neighbors, and be a true advocate.
Yeah. We could certainly talk about this all day and not cover it, but I appreciate everyone giving us a glimpse into such an important issue. I want to thank all of our attendees for being a part of this, as well as our wonderful panelists. Next up, we have putting out the authentic welcome mat, which starts at 10:40 in the economic and community development track. If you give you an appetite for more conversation, join the community tab on Whova and we can talk about it more. Happy Iowa Ideas, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you all.